Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of The Monster's Den. It's Thursday night. It's Halloween in a couple days. As promised, we're giving you your second film franchise ranking in a row. But before we start talking about that, let me introduce the crew. We got Craig Kaminski in the house. Chris Allo is here. Dan Brown is here. All the way from Scotland, David Gallagher is here. And the man from Ohio himself, Mr. Jamie Laszlo. What's happening, guys?
Going on.
Hello.
You ready to talk Phantasm?
Sure.
Reggie
All
Bannister
right.
Appreciation Society.
Yeah, there we go. So that's the 5-disc Blu-ray set that I have. Craig's got the same one. I'm sure others have it as well.
$15.99 at Walmart.
That's right. That's right.
Well ago, years ago.
With
Or actually Scream Factory, I think it was it? No, it was
balls, Davey. Look, there you go.
Yeah.
right.
Davey's got balls.
He's got balls.
Wolfman's got nards.
The creation of Don Coscarelli, whoever says his name. The first film debuted in the late 70s, and they were actually pumping out films just a couple of years ago. And I guess it's the franchise is done at this point.
Yeah.
I would think. Maybe I would hope. I don't know. But we got 5 films. We're going to rank them in the order that we like them. Starting with number 5, I'll turn it over to Craig to kickstart us off here.
Just going one at a time, or
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, as Pete was saying, I this was a little tough for me, and I only watched one a day. I didn't do a string of them, and I had only previously seen parts 1 and 2 before. Part 2 I rented on videotape when I was a teen, and having never seen 1, so I don't remember if it made sense at the time or not. And part 1, the first time I saw it was actually at one of the horror-thons that they showed it, a nice print of it.
They don't make sense when you watch them in a row, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So my number 5, I went with Phantasm IV: Oblivion as my least favorite. It starts with a montage of old footage, and it picks up where part 3 lets off. They at least have a trend of the new movie picks up where the prior one left off, but there's a large gap, I think, between most of these movies, so you really do need a refresher as to what happened. I mean, it's easy for us to watch these on Blu-ray, but if you were a new watcher at the time, it might be a little bit difficult. But Reggie is hanging in a corner with a whole bunch of balls, and Mike is transforming into psychic Mike or something. I mean, the tall man and Reggie both look pretty old in this movie, and I mean, there's a part 5, so they're going to look even older. But it's just really super low budget with all the old footage and deleted scenes from part 1. Michael Baldwin. He's just not a good actor in my opinion, and a lot of his scenes are just him driving with a voiceover. So that was telling me that there was no script or something while they were shooting it. And it's kind of like, hey, we'll fill it in later. Just look dead ahead like you're driving. And the one thing that was all right, at least about it, I mean, at least you got to see Angus Scrim playing Jebediah Morningside, and he was normal. I mean, and he was talking like a nice normal man, which I'm sure he was. I don't know if Chris, if you able to meet him.
Met all the Phantasm people, and
and he where he's like, oh, would you like some lemonade? And hello, and he seemed like a very pleasant man. So that was kind of a switch to see. But I mean, one girl ends up having balls for boobs, and blowing up balls with a tuning fork, I thought was really kind of stupid. So I mean, I couldn't really get into part 4 as much, and plot wise, I after I get done watching it, I don't remember what happened. It's kind of like it just went in one side and just blew out the other. I really was having a tough time focusing, and I watch these in the morning generally also, and I was just I don't know. I don't know, but my least favorite, Oblivion Part 4.
I forgot the tuning fork shit. God.
Yeah.
Yeah, which he just happens to have on him.
Yeah, of course.
Well, he's got his guitar with him all the
He's a
time. Of course he
guitar
does.
player.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chris.
Okay, my least favorite, Phantasm III, Lord of the Dead. Phantasm was one of the first movies I rented when I got a VCR in 1983. I remember seeing part 2 in 1988 at the Jefferson Valley Mall, the theater, and fucking loved it. And then it took years waiting for part 3. I remember me and my buddy talked to Reggie Bannister at the Fangoria convention, and he was playing it up. And then, he kept saying it's going to come to theaters. Of course, it didn't come to theaters. It went straight to video, and I just thought it's a piece of shit. To me, it's huge. To me, Don Coscarelli watched 2 movies before making this movie. He watched Home Alone and he watched Army of Darkness. And he's like, oh, okay, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna turn Reggie into Ash, and then I gotta have this annoying fucking kid who's literally doing a Home Alone where he's running around living by himself, but setting traps, and in this movie actually killing people. But I just fucking hated it. James LaGrosse was he played the Mike character in Phantasm II, which was kind of a bummer. But when you're rewatching the movies, like, he's a fucking much better actor than Michael Baldwin. Michael Baldwin sucks. And I'm watching part 3 and I'm like, okay, so they bring back Michael Baldwin, but it's obvious that he's a shitty actor, so he's incapacitated for like fucking half the movie. So they replace him with an annoying black girl and the annoying kid from fucking Home Alone. I mean, Reggie Bannister just keeps making googly eyes at this girl Rocky, and every time I see her on screen, I'm like, oh my god, dude, it's like you want to fuck Lawrence Taylor from when he was in WrestleMania 11. I'm like, then they have these fucking zombies and all this stupid comedy. I mean, there was a couple jokes here and there in Phantasm 1 and 2, but this movie, man, it just lays on the stupid slapstick fucking comedy from Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness, which is fine for that franchise, but I think it completely is out of place in this franchise, and I just fucking hate this movie.
All right.
Boy, we're gonna be way different. All right.
Dan, what do you got for number 5?
I was kind of torn between number 3 and 4, Oblivion. I'm going to go in Craig's direction, number 4, because it is I like to review this film as kind of like the Plan 9 of the Phantasm universe, taking all this old footage and putting it together and so forth and so on. And the funny thing, just to give you a little background, I'm not talking much about the film because somebody else is going to talk about it as well, but the history of that film, it's like when you watch Spookies, the film is kind of like a train wreck in the finished product, but the documentary makes it make sense. Okay. When I got this box set, I don't know if it appears in the smaller ones, but the other sets you guys have, when this first came out, they have some extensive documentaries and stories from Coscarelli and how this came about. And, they did number 1. Number 2 came along, and Universal, X many years later, offers them $3 million budget on number 2. But stipulation was we need an actor, not Michael Baldwin. That's why James LaGrosse came into the picture. He wasn't a star, but he had some television credits and people kind of knew when he was young and so forth. So then they make number 3. Now, number 4 comes along after number 3 is made. Okay, a fellow who worked with Coscarelli on a film that it was nothing to do with Phantasm as a production assistant was a guy by the name of Roger Avary. And Roger Avary went off to win the Academy Award and became a director. He won the Academy Award with Quentin Tarantino for writing Pulp Fiction. And he's a huge fan of Phantasm. And he basically says, as Coscarelli said, he did that thing, and where you're going to go after the Super Bowl, I'm going to go to Disneyland. Avary made some kind of a comment about where you're going to go after you win the Academy Award. He goes, I want to write a Phantasm movie. And they spent the next X amount of years after number 3 working on this thing called Phantasm 1999, which is going to be this post-apocalyptic kind of like the Book of Eli. They had Bruce Campbell set to be in this film, playing a crazy general. so forth and so on. But in the meanwhile, it kept getting battered back and forth. And all of a sudden, Coscarelli decides to make a film to keep the momentum going. And that's how 4 came up. And using a couple of ideas from Avery and also setting up some things that you would see that would have been later on in later films. But it's just like Plan 9. It's convoluted. It makes no sense. I mean, the old footage really doesn't fit in with the new. It really doesn't do any narrative to the storyline whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I saw it. It came out as a no-frills budget DVD on MGM, and I couldn't get through it the first time I saw it. And I love certain aspects of some of these films. Number 3, by the way, and why number 3? What happens? They're also given a $650,000 budget for Oblivion 4. They had $300,000 for the first film, $3 million from Universal Studios on number 2. Number 3, Universal put up $2.5 million for number 3. And after they saw the finished film, they sat there and said, "This is going to go to video." And it had a bigger release on home video, one of those straight to video things, a small thing. So 4 just kind of came along to fill the gap. 1999 fell through the cracks, and you were left with this number 4. All you needed was Bela Lugosi and Tor Johnson there, and it would have been in a graveyard and a cape. So there you go. Number 4.
All right, Davey.
So yeah, I mean, I'd seen the first 2 and loved them, and then Arrow released in 2016 this box set, which had everything, including the then new Ravager number 5. So the brand new film was released as brand new in this set, so I got to see the sequels 3, 4, 5 straight back to back. And I kind of love Phantasm as a franchise. It wasn't a slog for me to revisit at all. I really dig Phantasm. I love the lore, the mythology, the characters. There is, however, one that I could take out and quite happily not watch it again, and that would be, I'm going to go with Chris on it. It's number 3. I think that's the one that just doesn't have much to commend it. It's I know Chris said that you can factor in Macaulay Culkin and certainly some Ash stuff. I'd also throw in Terminator 2, because that kid's John Connor, basically. There's a lot of that going on as well.
Good point.
There's some awful dialogue in it, which there is throughout the franchise, but usually intentionally. The tone's really weird. The casting's bizarre. That little gang that have kind of taken over the small town. One of them's like 65 years old, and the other 2 are really young. It's a very strange dynamic. You also even get a little bit of aliens from that kid, where he's saying the lurkers come out at night, mostly. So, and I don't need to see Reggie Bannister, even in a dream, doing doggy style with Rocky. That gave me flashbacks to that scene in View to a Kill, where Roger Moore has sex with Grace Jones. I mean, that's just nightmare stuff. That is just horrendous. And it feels so 90s, but bad 90s, trying to catch let's see what's hip, let's see what's in the zeitgeist. So we're getting lines like, "Yo, bitch, hands off my boy." And we're getting these much more zombie-like characters that are basically deadites. There's no real difference between them. I don't need the explanation for what these are. I don't need to know that they're actually the brains. So the bodies are compressed into these Jawas, but the brains are in these. I don't need that. I think it was better when these just were something that we don't understand from an unknown place. I thought that was a much cooler way to do it. And again, it just goes into too much of, let's explain the backstory. No, I don't need all that kind of thing. I don't need that at all. Reggie starting to quote Rudyard Kipling. I don't really get that. He doesn't seem like the kind of ice cream vendor who would know Rudyard Kipling to quote him, but then he starts doing the "if you can keep your head when all around you are losing theirs" was quite bizarre. But I did love one line at the end, which kind of sums up the franchise for me, from the Tall Man, where Reggie says, "What the hell's going on?" And in fact, it's not from the Tall Man. It's from Jodie, who says, "Seeing's easy, understanding takes time." And that's kind of where I am with Phantasm. It's kind of where I've always been with it. It's a franchise that a bit like a giallo. I think you feel more than you understand. It's not plot driven; it's emotion driven. Although this is the bottom tier, I still think there's some decent moments in it, but it is still, yeah, number 3, Lord of the Dead, bottom of the barrel. It's the only one that I could happily take out the set. So, of all these ones here, I could lose that one, but yeah, number 3, Lord of the Dead.
All right, Jamie.
Yeah, this is the first time I sat through all of them. I saw the first one, and I never saw a sequel. And I always feared the sequels would be weird and boring. And that's exactly what part 4 is, my least favorite. But I will say, after watching all of these movies, this franchise, for me, it answers the burning question: can a balding man pull off a ponytail? And the answer is no, because God damn it, I tried it in 1995 and it wasn't working for me. So I keep seeing Reggie with his ponytail hitting on these chicks. I'm like, dude, you are a 3. You cannot hit on these girls that are younger than you and like 8s and 7s and whatever. But that's what I loved about this franchise the most. Reggie always thinking he had it shot and always getting him in trouble. That's the best. So, Part 5, Oblivion, it was on a $600,000 budget, but it does look like it's on a $6,000 budget. A lot in the desert. The scenes between Mike and the tall man where they're talking just go on and on and on. And that's when I was watching this going, this is what I expected from all the sequels. This kind of bullshit. Thankfully, Reggie does find a girl half his age and her boobs turn into spheres, and that kind of saves the movie for me right there. The director, what's his name? Don Coscarelli. Yeah, he likes to get David Lynchy at times. The problem is he's not very good at it, and it shows, but he tries. And when he does that, that's where this franchise falters the most for me. So yeah, Oblivion, I think, is the worst one of them all.
That's my number 5 as well. Phantasm IV, Oblivion. I mean, I made the mistake of watching this and the 5th film back to back the other night, and I was like halfway through the 5th film, like, oh my god, what am I doing to myself? Oblivion is just a mess to me. I mean, they're using all this unused footage from leftover from the first film. They're going back and forth with it. And yeah, you got Mike is his character like has nothing to do in this film. There's long stretches where they're just the camera's on him and he's just not doing anything, or he's thinking. There's like this narration and he's got nothing to do. You guys are all absolutely right. You know, Reggie, now they're trying to make him to this Ash character. The whole hanging sequence to me is utterly ridiculous, where they're out in the desert. First, Mike's getting hung, then the tall man's getting hung. Well, who is it? What's going on here? And throughout this whole movie, I'm just like, I don't know what the fuck is going on here. And I'm bored out of my mind. So yeah, Phantasm IV, Oblivion from 1998. That's another weird thing. There's such huge gaps between when they made these films. Yeah. You can tell how old everybody's looking. You can tell how little story there is and how confusing it's getting. And they're trying to do direct continuations from the films before, but then they lose themselves. I don't know. But yeah, that's my number 5. Back to Greg.
At my number 3, I'm going along with what you guys said. I'm going with Lord of the Dead.
4.
Part 4, excuse me. 4. My 4 is part 3, Lord of the Dead. And return of OG Mike. You know, I wrote here. You know, not a good actor. Picks up where 2 ends. And outside of the hearse, you know, but then Reggie looks like a lot older than he did, you know, outside of the hearse than he did before. I did like the one scene where the nurse has like a ball, has like a ball in her head. That was, you know, that was at least a decent enough scene. But as you guys already said, you know, now they're brain balls. Jody comes back as a friendly ball, you know, and yeah, the little kid is kind of annoying. You know, I didn't care much for the Rocky character either. And although again, as you guys have said, it is funny how Reggie manages to score ass. You know, he was 3 for 3. You know, at this point, you know, he up to this point. But yeah, just kind of kind of a mess. And like you said, Mike is, I wrote here, Mike is gone for a good chunk of the movie. Does it matter? So, it's like, he shows up, but then and it's like, oh yeah, it's a guy from part one, but he's like 20 years older, but then he's not there for most
Ghost's age. You didn't know that?
Yeah. And side note, the one character, Edna, in this, she was one of the thieves. She was in the Seinfeld episode. She got gonorrhea from a tractor. When I was watching this, it was
there's your trivia fact for you.
Yeah, I when I was watching, I was like, she looks familiar. It's like she's from her character's name was Sophie, and where Jerry would say, "So Sophie, it's me," and she said she got gonorrhea from a tractor, and so that's at least that's how I remembered when I was watching. I was like, "Oh, there's a familiar face," and once we get further along, there's another character who jogged my memory too when I confirmed it, but we'll get to that in a bit. But my number 4 is part 3, Lord of the Dead. I like the title, but didn't really like the movie.
Chris.
My next pick is Phantasm V Ravager from 2016. I kind of like that they were, trying to tie it all together, and I like that they brought back the lady in lavender. In fact, I met them all. They did a convention tour before this came out, so I met all of them, and I had previously interviewed Don Coscarelli for Pit Magazine, and when I met him at the Monster Mania convention, he actually remembered me, which was cool. But man, overall, this movie just falls flat. I mean, the plot, like almost all of them, is just completely incoherent. Everybody is fucking old as dirt. Angus Scrimm literally looks like he died and nobody told him. Jody is like the oldest fucking ghost everywhere. The special effects are like fucking terrible. The CGI spheres are just awful. And I kind of really don't like the whole dementia angle where like Reggie's like in an old folks home and he's having dementia, and was all of this a dream or not? Because it's kind of sad and depressing, and then the weird thing is there is some cool concepts at the end where they're like going off into the sunset to go to the snow and they're showing some footage that they shot for that, like while the credits are rolling. And I'm like, oh, okay, like I would have liked some more of this rather than, Reggie is old and shitting himself in bed because he's got dementia. And in reality, Reggie was, the real life actor, Reggie Bannister, was having health issues, and Angus Scrimm had already died by the time the movie was released. So yeah, the whole thing's just a fucking mess. I just don't hate this one as much as Phantasm III.
Cool. Dan?
I'm going to go with Phantasm III, Lord of the Dead, is my next choice. Pretty much everyone has hit all the cylinders on this one. And there's nothing more I can say about that one. I'm not going to add anything to that because everybody's hit it. And I didn't like the comedic end. I didn't like the trying to be funny, trying to be Ash, trying to be this. All right, we'll give Reggie credit in all the films. He is the everyday action guy. And when was the last time you saw Bruce Willis try to get laid in one of his movies? Reggie always prefaces with, it's kind of lonely on the road. So, but number 3, don't need. Everybody's covered it. I bought it on Anchor Bay years ago and watched it once, and when I sit and watch these things, it was kind of like, it was grueling. It was grueling to sit through some of these, There you go.
So my number 4 will be number 4, Oblivion, which it's the one with the sphere tits, isn't it? It's the easiest way to remember this one. For a franchise that uses it's quite funny that we're doing this back to back with Child's Play, because both are franchises that have run for a lot longer than people imagine, and both are franchises that have used the same actors for a lot longer than people would imagine as well, and have one guy kind of calling the shots at the helm. So quite a few similarities between the two franchises, to watch the cast grow up and grow old in front of your eyes in a lot of cases. But yeah, I really like the use of the deleted scenes from number one. I think thematically they tie in very well. I think it was quite a deft way to use some of them thematically. It was quite lucky that they left out alternate scenes that depict hanging and quite visceral scenes rather than just small moments. I think it was quite clever the way they used some of them again. I like the as much as I don't like most of the Deadite ripoffs, I like the zombie cop from the start. It's pretty disgusting when he vomits into Reggie's mouth.
And that is
he's Bob Ivy, who would go on to be Bubba Hotep. So he's worked with Coscarelli quite a bit. I like seeing a little bit of the backstory. As much as I don't like too much explanation, I really appreciate that we get to see Civil War era Jebediah, and we get to see him as the old country doctor scientist, and then he's made the portal, and we see him go in and then come right back out again, but we don't have any explanation of what happens in the middle. I love that. That's fantastic that it says this happened, but we're not going to tell you what happened to him through there. How did he become this? How did he get all these powers? What happened through the portal? He went in a curious, kindly scientist and came back as the tall man in seconds. But it doesn't feel the need to over explain itself, and I really appreciate that. I like Reggie getting ready for battle again while gearing up with the ice cream man stuff, when it's as if Rambo's getting ready for action, but he's just getting dressed as an ice cream vendor. That's just fantastic. Jodie dying for about the 20th time in the franchise. I kind of like that it's all, is this real? Is this a dream? We now have parallel realities. There's infinite numbers of tall men potentially. So it doesn't really matter if someone's dead, because they could still be alive in another reality where you can go and grab them, pull them through, and then they might remember you anyway, or they might be a different person, as we'll see in the next one. It's all up in the air. It's all kind of dream logic. And there is a great line at the end of this one from the tall man, where he says to Reggie, ice cream man is all in your head, which really does tie up the theme of Ravager years in advance. So I really like that it doesn't make much sense in the context of that movie, but in the larger context of the franchise, I think Coscarelli is actually really clever at finding little moments that, wow, we can pick up on that years later, like the cold thing in one of the films, just that was a total coincidence. The Angus Scrimm turned around when some dry ice was coming out of the ice cream van, and then that becomes a plot point in a later film. I think Coscarelli uses this low budget mentality quite well. It's a very adept thing that he has going from with low budget filmmaking. But yeah, it's lower down, but yeah, I really like this one. And to be honest, number 3 is the only one I dislike. So yeah, 4, Oblivion. I like it.
It's funny. You said a couple things there. It's almost like the tall man is like the Kang the Conqueror of this franchise, right? Kind of compared to like Marvel and whatnot. Very similar.
Yeah, although probably a
lots
bit
of
less
variants,
controversial given
given
what Jonathan Majors is up to. But they wish they'd cast Angus Scrimm instead. Even dead, he'd be a better casting choice.
And like the explanation about where what happened, how did Angus Scrimm's character, how did he become the tall man? It's very much like Jeffrey Combs in From Beyond. He comes back all weirded out, but you really don't know what the process was to turn him into
it happens. You're not privy to it. You just need to know what happened. And I think that's show, don't tell. And I think the franchise needs credit for that.
Jamie.
This might be a shock to everyone, but look, I'm grading these on. I don't think any of these movies, well, I think 4 is pretty bad, but I don't think any of the rest are great, but I don't think they're downright awful. So I'm just not on how great they are, how much fun I had watching them. All right, that's it. And I'm going with Phantasm II as my second to the bottom. I feel like the makers of this franchise after the first one. Now, this is 1988, 9 years later. I feel like they said, look, there's Freddy, there's Jason, there's Michael Myers. We got the tall man. How come we can't get a slice of this pie? Let's build our franchise. And it's probably what they were thinking and what they did here. I was amazed that it started off right where 2 ended, but then I found out all the movies do this, which gets confusing because they act like it's been years and years and years, and they're obviously aging, but they always pick up where the last one left. So it gets really, really confusing. But it kind of picks up until it doesn't, and then they're old again. And in the beginning, see, the first hour of this movie, it slogs for me. And right when Reggie was saying, hey man, my house never blew up, man. My house is fine. I didn't blow up my own house, man. And I'm thinking, why don't you drive to your house? And if it's there, then say, see, it's there. I never blew it up. But they do drive to the house, and it is there. And there's no I told you so. What happens is the house blows up again, or for the first time. I don't know. And that's when I'm thinking this is going to be rough. This is going to be a rough franchise. So the first hour of this movie, with all the characters before they meet up and the priest and blah, 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 is 1.5 stars. The last 30 minutes is a 4-star riot. It just flips on me. And I just had a blast with the last 30 minutes. The guy in the incinerator, a guy cutting off his own hand, the sphere going through a guy's body, then the chainsaw battle with Reggie and some other guy. And I'm like, where was all this the first hour? So love the last 30 minutes. Really didn't like the first hour, so I'm really torn on how to rate it in my movie diary. But it's not awful, but it's coming in second to last.
My number 4 is Phantasm Ravager from 2016, the last film. I mean, we've already talked about it a bit. Everybody looks so much older. The war with the tall man is still going on. Reggie's in the hospital. Other scenes, he's not in the hospital. What's real? What's not? He's older. He doesn't look as old. Mike and Jody pop in and out of the film. Nobody cares. They have nothing to do. To me, this film looks really cheap, thrown together. The plot is convoluted. Honestly, when I got done watching this one, I'm hoping they put a fork in this series, because I think the last couple of films for me just don't really work at all.
A tuning fork or a fork?
Whatever works. Whatever you got.
Yeah,
whatever you got. We'll use those. That'll be fine. But it's just, to me, it's just really watching this and seeing, Angus Scrimm looks like,
oh yeah. Like I said, he looked like he died. Nobody told him. Yeah,
he was like 88 years old.
Yeah, and just everybody, and like you guys mentioned about Jody. I mean, he keeps popping in and out of all these movies, and he just, he's put on weight. He looks older. I'm like, ghosts are not supposed to do that. It's just ridiculous. It's like, you know what? You killed him off in the first movie. Leave him gone already. So yeah, that's my number 4. Back to Craig.
My number 3 is Ravager. Old man Reggie walking the earth. Reggie's got dementia. Mike's got glasses. And Reggie's still playing guitar and trying to get some ass. The tall man, I think, was CGI at the one part in the beginning where he's like outside of the house, or like looking in with a couple balls like next to him, and I wrote here, hey, that's Daniel Roebuck, and he's not speaking English, and and to be honest, I have this rank here because I thought the movie was, for par for the course. It's like I'm already, it's like I've sat through 4 of these fucking things, and and I was like, well, it's all right. And then Chunk the Midget shows up, and I just totally lost it from there. And then it was like, no. I was like, no, I can't do it anymore. I'm tapping out. I got Phantasm fatigue. And then it turned into World War balls, with the giant balls, now, and, bad CGI. And Jody shows up, 10 minutes at the end of the movie, because why the fuck not, and then just for the hell of it, let's just throw Rocky in a mid-credit scene with one-handed Chunk. And it's like, does that mean that the story's going to continue? I don't know. But by that time I'd kind of tapped out. I was fatigued from Phantasm and Balls and Tall Men and and Reggie and all that stuff. So, but I have it ranked in the middle because I was intrigued enough at the beginning and everything, but about halfway through I was like, that's it. But yeah, Ravager's my number 3.
Chris.
Phantasm IV Oblivion. I think, for this franchise, I think 3, 4, and 5 were all disappointing. But I think 4, while it's a fucking mess, I did really like the deleted scenes. I thought that was really cool, and I thought they worked that into the movie fairly well. I also like how they completely wrote out the little fucking kid from part 3 and just never addressed him. Like he didn't even fucking matter. They
Bye,
just
Timmy.
erased him.
Bye, Timmy. Nice to know you.
Yeah. Like fuck you, Timmy. Everybody hates you, so you're gone. And yeah, I kind of liked I laughed with the boobs part, with the boob spheres, and I did similar to what Davey said. I definitely agreed. I thought it was cool how they showed the backstory of the Tall Man as Jebediah Morningside, but it was just enough. Like we didn't need to see his map on how he built everything and how he became evil. But I thought that was kind of cool. But overall, the movie's still kind of a mess.
Cool.
I was just thinking how in part 3, like, Reggie drops the kid off at that orphanage or whatever.
Right.
And he gives
Which
a lady
you would have an orphanage in the apocalypse.
Yeah, and he gives a lady, but then he gives that lady like a good $1,000 or so, and then the kid just hops in his trunk. I mean, I would be livid if I showed up at the next town and found that fucking kid in my trunk, and I would be like, "You're gonna go walk back there, and you're gonna get my money back." So,
Money, which we're all surprised he even had, right? Selling ice
He
cream.
always has money.
He's always got it. Yeah, he's always got some cash on him.
Being an ice cream,
those
ice
rocket
cream guy's
pops,
very
it's a
lucrative.
lucrative business. The rocket
That's
pops.
some ice cream business.
It's all cash.
All cash. There you go. Dan, you're number 3.
Oh, I'm going to go with Ravager. Why I went with Ravager is even though, yes, it is, everybody looks old as the seas. The pacing was actually more brisk than 4. It moved a little bit, a little bit faster. But other than that, and they took a lot of things that were supposed to be in Phantasm 1999, the battle CUDA at the end and all this stuff. And so once again, he took ideas from the other scripts they had. And through, I guess they had to try to find some kind of closure for it. Yeah, bringing Chunk in, who was kind of like an annoying munchkin. Rocky doing her best Michonne impersonation at the end with the dreadlocks and such. Angus Scrim looking like, as Chris said, somebody had to remind him he had died that morning. It's tough, but I guess he just did it because he knew Angus Scrim was getting on there. Matter of fact, I think in 5 they actually filmed some scenes in Angus Scrim's house or something with a green screen. To make it more comfortable for him than bringing him to the studio. And then also, as Chris was saying, yeah, Reggie had some health issues, and I believe in real life he is suffering, sadly enough, ironically, is from dementia. He doesn't go to conventions anymore. His wife put out some press releases on it and such. So it's kind of like grim and ironic that this is what was going on. But I liked it because of the pacing. That's better than the other ones. It does fit into it, so forth. There are moments I say, okay, and then there are moments where I go and I kind of sludged through it and so forth. And there you go, Ravager.
All right. Davey.
So my number 3, I'm gonna go with one Jamie's mentioned. Actually, I'm gonna go with Phantasm II for my number 3. To be on board with it, you need to accept straight away that you're losing the ambiguity of the end of the first film. So Jodie saves the day at the end of the first film, but wait a minute, Jodie actually died before the first film even started. So as a standalone film, you lose that ambiguity by setting up a sequel where we have to now give you a narrative. So you lose that. So as a standalone thing, that this kind of kills that first film's standalone quality. But I like what it's doing anyway. I love the ridiculousness of turning Reggie into the action hero. He's not Bruce Campbell by any stretch of the imagination, but he's so far from being Bruce Campbell, who is a charismatic, kind of dashing action kind of guy in a way. That he's got his own strange charm. It looks.
That's what I was thinking. Not having charm is his charm.
Yeah, I mean, dressed as the ice cream guy, he looks like Clint Howard as the ice cream man in the film The Ice Cream Man. They look the same and dress the same. I mean, I love him with the quadruple barreled shotgun. That's such a cool and ridiculous little invention of his. Killing the little Jawa guys, which they were all over the place at the time, weren't they? From obviously Star Wars, but then Neil Young's got them, and Russ Never Sleeps. Just Jawas everywhere, I guess. There's explosions galore in the second one. It's definitely the action franchise, the action one of the franchise. There's 2 houses blowing up in the first 10 minutes alone. When his family get blown up, he's not too fussed about it. He's more just Charles Bronson and Death Wish, which is great. James LaGrosse is okay. Brad Pitt audition for that part tells you in the extras. That would have been quite a different thing for Brad Pitt's career, wouldn't it? I like the road trip nature of it. I like changing, because the first film is very much just a couple of locations back and forth. I like this going on the road trip, seeing the towns destroyed by the tall man. I love the visual of, I always love graveyards in film, but the empty graves when they're walking through them and they're all just completely hollowed out. That's such a great visual. I love seeing that. Mm-hmm. The old widow walking in on a priest stabbing her husband and then fainting cracks me up every time. That's just brilliant black comedy. And that old priest, I had to look him up. I was like, I know his face. He's one of those guys. He's the old guy from the Avengers who stands up to Loki in Berlin. Like, we've had dictators here before. We're not going to bow down to you. And so I was like, that's that guy. After the third big explosion, we get Reggie going into full 80s action hero mode with the "Let's go kick some ass," which again is so bizarre to see this squat little guy doing that kind of thing. There's some great practical effects in at the girl with the bug coming out her spine, the tall man with the bug coming out his head. In fact, the tall man goes a little bit Incredible Melting Man, to reference a film that we talked about briefly off air before we came on. There's a really cool effect where he starts to melt away, or where the character pulls her scalp off. The wonderfully named character Alchemy. Alchemy, what the fuck? And it's Greg Nicotero and Robert Kurtzman doing the effects on number 2. So one of their early efforts. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely the action film. It's the one I'd recommend to people who maybe aren't patient enough for number 1, which has got a different tone entirely. You could pretty much start here and film, and yeah, I think this is the 80s Phantasm. So number 3 for me, dead in the middle, Phantasm II.
Cool. Jamie.
I'm going with 5, Ravager. It's not a great film, but I have had a little bit of fun with this. It does start off with recaps, which I found, now this is 2016, I found a little 1981-ish, Friday the 13th-ish, and I'm like, we're in the 2016 now. I don't know if we still need recaps. But when they're going back and forth with really old Reggie and kind of old Reggie who's still fighting, I thought he looked different. I thought they did a decent job with lighting and makeup to make him look really old and just kind of old. So that was a little impressive for me. But 14 minutes in, you get Reggie hitting him on the hot chick, and they go into the house together. Now, here's the thing. She wasn't a demon. She wasn't anything. And she was going to bang him. But Reggie was asleep. She came back down the stairs to give him a mercy fuck, and he was asleep. But her name was Dawn, and I think the actress's name is Dawn. And I was like, they really dropped the ball, the sphere here. They should have made him bang her. Then he wakes up the next morning, sleeping on her ass like it's a pillow, and he goes, waking up to the crack of dawn. You dropped the ball right there. That would have been great.
Ricky Gervais had that joke first. Come on.
Oh, really?
It's in the Office, yeah.
Oh, I've never seen that. He banged a girl named Dawn and woke up to the crack
There's
of dawn.
Dawn in the office, yeah.
Oh, that sucks. Every idea I have is already used. I just don't
You
realize
tried,
it.
Jamie. You tried.
Don't worry.
I tried.
Everything's been used, Jamie. Don't.
Yeah, but there are things like they look. I think they make up half the shit as they go along in these movies. Like, why are there big spheres, humongous spheres in the sky? Because it's a cool idea. Good enough. Whatever. You know, I find myself when I'm watching these movies, I go, why is that happening? And before I get that sentence out of my brain, another 3 things have happened that I don't understand is happening. So you start to forget the initial thing you were asking about, and you start wondering about the thing that's happening now. Instead of just doing all that, just roll with it. Just roll with it and try to have a good time with it. But I will say, I give this a lot of respect. This started in 1979. We're now in 2016 with the same 4 actors, the same director. He didn't direct this one, but I think he wrote and produced it. And you got to give him respect. And for a franchise that started in 1979, we're now in the era where there's mid-credit scenes, and they're doing that. So they came a long way. And I actually like the mid-credit scene when Rocky shows up. I thought it was really well done. Here's the thing, though. I'm like, if I would have saw these as they came out, by the time we're at 2016, I would have been like, who's the chick? I would not have remembered from 22 years ago, Rocky. But I think most people remember her. And this is why. Because if you made it this far to part 5, you got to be a fan. You got to be a Phantasm fan if you made it this far. And that means you've seen all these movies more than once. So you know who Rocky is. And if that's not the case, you bought the box set and you just binge watched it like us.
You were in the box set, you know where you got them all. Yeah.
Right. So I think most people know who Rocky is for one reason or another. I don't think anyone goes, Phantasm V. I've never seen any of them. Let me start with 5. No.
Yeah, you don't want to do that. Nope. My number 3 is Phantasm III, Lord of the Dead from 94. Yeah, I mean, we talked a bit about it already. I really thought the ending to the second movie was well done. And then we get to the beginning of this. Reggie is miraculously still alive and well. Meanwhile, we thought he got thrown out of the car and didn't kind of look like he got ran over, like, oh, Reggie's gone. You know, the original actor for Mike is back. Liz, who was a major character in the second film, she's now dead. Mike goes into a hospital. The tall man captures Mike. Jody shows up again. You got a kid named Tim. You got a girl named Rocky. Nobody cares about them. Another confusing plot sequence. Lots of flying spears. Actually. I think that's my favorite part of this film. There's some gore. But again, to me, it's all really convoluted. I think I had a hard time ranking the last 3 films because I really don't care much for any of them. But for me, I think this one plays just a little bit better, even though it's pretty ridiculous on its own as well. But there's just certain aspects of this movie that I kind of like a little bit more than the 4th and 5th. So that's why for me, it's right in the middle of the pack. But it could easily be my number 5 because I think the final 3 films are just not very good. So back to Craig.
My number 2, I went with part 2, The Ball is Back. And but it's funny how all these movies, they start with a recap of how the prior movie ended. Since I was watching these in order, when part 2 comes on, I was like, wait a second, that's not how part 1 ended. I mean, it was like, am I losing my mind? And I actually had to pull up on my phone. I was like, the ending of part 1, and it's like, wait, that's not it. Did the house blow up? I was like, no, I was really going bonkers. It was like, wait, was I not paying attention? But they end up doing that with all of these. As you guys already said, biggest budget out of all of these. I did like the action aspect of this, especially as Jamie had mentioned towards the back half of the movie. The chick Alchemy, was all right to look at. I laughed out loud where she was doing the ride 'em cowgirl on good old Reggie, where that I really thought was funny, where she's where she's on top of him there. But it's funny, the movie's called The Ball is Back. The balls don't show up until about 54 minutes into the movie. So or as it says, the ball is back on the back of this on the back of this one here.
Yeah,
But
it doesn't say that in main at all. Yeah.
yeah, they don't show up until 54 minutes into the movie. But again, it's with good action. I like how the tall man meets his demise in this by dying via the honey mustard ball, and he melts into
Honey mustard.
well, yeah, there was like honey mustard everywhere in these movies. I mean, they must have used like a lot of craft services on that. And I'm sure you guys caught the when there the scene in the crematorium, the one tag on the body said Sam Raimi.
Sam Raimi,
Yeah.
On it. And last thing was the character Liz. She was from season 1 of Beverly Hills 90210. She was Brandon's girlfriend from Minnesota. Chris, I'm going to mail you my man card. You can hold on to it, for a bit. But that's,
Yeah, you had me on that one there, Craig. That's
but when I was watching, I was like, man, she looks kind of familiar. And then I looked that up, and I was like, yeah, she was Brandon's girlfriend. Hit on Dylan right when she had her first chance. But anyway, that was how I recognized her in that. But all in all, relatively a good and entertaining movie. And especially nowadays, these movies that have such long gaps between them, it's more common now. Where Independence Day, like the sequel didn't come out till 20 years later, but back then it's like, they cranked out the sequels pretty quickly. And so for this one to have one 9 years after the fact was definitely an anomaly. So, but it was an enjoyable movie. And I thought this one was a bit of fun. Part 2.
Cool. Chris?
Yeah, to piggyback off Craig's statement, and I think Davey mentioned it earlier about the gaps in between the movies here. I mean, I think it's definitely a detriment to the series. But when I was rewatching all the movies, I stumbled across an interview with Don Coscarelli from 1979, and he was saying how he was being pressured to do a Phantasm sequel, and he had no interest. He's like, I want to do other things. So
like in 1980, 81, 82, like right afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah. To me, I'm sure he did want to do other things. And listen, he made Beastmaster and a couple other things that did well. And so I'm sure he just kept putting it off, sort of like George Romero kept putting off his zombie sequels for years. And then, okay, would do it. But in Coscarelli's case, he kept using the same cast. But my number 2 is Phantasm I from 1979. This franchise, like you mentioned, Pete, to me, it's all 1 and 2. Everything after that is I got no use for it. And while I said Michael Baldwin's acting in 3 and on is terrible, I think it totally works. He works as a scared 13-year-old kid. Yeah. As an adult, no, he doesn't fucking work at all. But he's completely believable as a scared 13-year-old, dealing with grief and loss of loved ones. Jodie's acting is not terrible. I think the thing that really struck me when rewatching Phantasm 1 is like, holy shit, like Reggie is like such a small part in the first movie. Like he doesn't show up till late in the movie, and he really doesn't have a huge impact on the film until towards the end. But my number 2, I really like it. Phantasm I.
Yeah, you have to wonder if when they got done making the first film, if Don basically was like, this is going to be a one and done. So really, there was no idea to have a central figure for a second film.
Oh,
and you already killed Jodie off, right? And 10 years later, is the actor who played Mike, is he going to be a leading role type of guy? Obviously, the studio didn't think so. So who you left with? Reggie.
Yeah, it's Reggie. And his acting was not bad. I mean, of the 3 heroic leads, I thought he was obviously the best choice to lead the franchise.
Yeah.
Although from a studio point of view, surely they would have been perfectly happy to just have the tall man as the recurring villain and do a Nightmare on Elm Street and have different characters interact with him each time.
Yeah.
That's what I was expecting going into this franchise.
aside when they, that's when with Coscarelli, which is true. These, as Chris said, they first film, that was it, one and done. It's a standalone film. That's how it ends. They kept, when they dangled a $3 million check, which was the biggest budget he was ever given on any film at that time. He says, I'll go, but his stipulation was it has to pick up immediately at the end of one. And that's why he got into this formula with that. But for $3 million, that's sure, I'll do it. And
yeah, you have to wonder how different this franchise would have been if, like you just mentioned, it was just a tall man in every movie with a different cast, just like Nightmare on Elm Street, just like Friday the 13th and everything else.
And yeah, I'm sure that the success of what you guys remember from the late '80s of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies is absolutely what led somebody to go, holy shit! Look at the money they're making with Nightmare on Elm Street. Well, Phantasm certainly seemed to have some influence on Nightmare on Elm Street. So yeah, let's throw some money at Coscarelli and let's get that going. See if we can do that.
Yep. Dan, you're number two.
My number two is number two. It was a toss-up between 1 and 2, but I'll go with 2. Interesting about this is, as Davey was saying before, the whole graveyard scene, this was given a $3 million budget. And let me tell you, it shows every penny of it. I mean, just production values, the mausoleums, and I remember seeing that in the theaters and watching as they walk up through that open graves in front of the mortuary, I think it is. And that's on the big screen. That was like wow, this is pretty cool. And it gets in, and the film just has its own. But what it also did, that number 2, it introduced us to, my opinion, has been the most kick-ass man-made weapon of any film series, whether it be action, adventure, or horror, and that's that 4-barreled shotgun with the free, ever-ready flashlight taped to the top with a handle on the bottom, and Reggie wields it with his bandito thing across the whole thing. That's a weapon that can work anywhere from Die Hard to the Muppets Take Manhattan. Doesn't matter. Better yet, Home Alone. That will work, and that's like a great weapon. I'm surprised they never went out and made, as far as in the collector's world, an actual full-size replica of that, because that is an iconic weapon in any type of a horror series. But the production values are great. I'm ashamed that Liz died in that film. I thought she was an interesting character. It would have been great if James LaGrosse would have stayed along with the series, but he was obviously a one and done with that. And I think Universal, they pumped a lot of money, and it bombed. Unfortunately, it bombed, and that set the stage for the rest of the films with budget and everything. And that's why when they made 3, and that went direct to video because Universal just gave up on it, that's when they decided, as I said earlier, 1999, Phantasm, that's when that film went to development hell, was canceled, because we're not going to take a film that went direct to video and then put a big budget into a big apocalyptic film. So that was that set the precedent. But number 2, production values, the tall man, the whole thing, I still like it. A little slow in the beginning. I agree with Jamie. All of a sudden, in the last 30, 40 minutes, it just kicks ass. Builds a little slow at first, but they're developing the story. And, and then the ball is back. They put a great promotional plan with the poster, and you scrim at the top. It's probably the best poster. And, the ball is back. And that's just telling people, this is the ball, the sphere. So number 2, but it was a tough choice, because between 1 and 2, this was a tough call for me.
And all those trailers that they always had the scene, or is this a dream? No, it's not. They always had that for every commercial that you would see.
Not to add something silly into this, but something we've been talking about along the way, and since we've watched all these films begrudgingly, I guess, is that, okay, when Reggie's house explodes, right, his aunt is coming down to make Thanksgiving dinner and all this, so he mentions this, but I believe, was it in 5 that his wife and kids were killed in that? He mentioned that his wife and children were killed in that explosion, but his family was married.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Just something I caught and I went, wait, that doesn't.
Yeah, it was married in the interim because Mike went in the asylum for a few years. Yeah.
Oh, you did. That's okay. Maybe in the interim. Okay, you're right.
That's right. It was 10 years, right?
Right. You're
During
right.
part 2.
Now it makes sense. Okay.
And wasn't there a line in part 2 where he says something like, oh, Susie can't wait to meet her Uncle Mike,
Yeah.
or whatever the fuck the daughter's name
Oh,
was.
okay, yes.
Because there definitely was a reference to Reggie
Okay.
having a
really-
wife and daughter in part two, but it was, it was quick. You had to, and I had forgotten about that as well until
You didn't.
rewatching it. But you're right, they never mention it again, I don't think, until part 5.
Yeah, right. But then again, this is a guy that still uses a line. It gets kind of lonely on the road.
I think he was using that when he was married too.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, I mean, 10 minutes after his wife blows
He didn't
up,
try to get
Yeah.
laid in
hitting
one
on,
because
yeah.
Mike, he was like Mike's wing. Jody's wingman. Jody was the good-looking guy. Told he got all the leftovers, I guess, at one point during the films. But then he
Stay with
became
what works.
a swinging coxman with a shotgun from 2 on. So
Maybe you're number 2.
So my number 2, it's actually going to be Ravager, number 5. I love this film. I genuinely love this film. When it came out as part of the box, and it was a brand new release, it was really exciting because we'd heard about it so quickly that there was a Phantasm film that had been made in secret. By the time it had been announced, it had already been made. And we knew that it was going to be tiny budget, because if it was going to be anything sizable, we would have heard about it. So they made it in secret and shot bits here and bits there. And as we know, Angus Scrimm wasn't in the best of health, and Reggie was starting to show it and whatnot. But I just think there's some wonderful iconography of it. I mean, the whole opening pastiche of, because they know they're going to be doing this kind of dual reality or triple reality in some places, they go over the top with some of the iconography. Like, Reggie is no longer just on a road trip. He's now basically Mad Max with a car and everything. He's basically Mad Max on the roads and total badass. Everything in that first 10 minutes is over the top action stuff that you would get in the Road Warrior or something like that, because it needs to contrast with, as Jamie said, the wonderful different look where he just jumps to having dementia in the same scene, where he looks completely disheveled. He looks just with a bit more stubble and less hair dye and some makeup and things. It just looks totally different, totally disheveled, and 20 years older at least. So Reggie having dementia, or does he? Is that the reality? Because again, it goes back to what the tall man said at the end of 4. It's all in your head, Ice Cream Man. So is this just a realm of the tall man, a purgatory, if you like, that Reggie's been left in? I quite like the iconography of having the giant spheres coming around, because it makes sense if he's got these small spheres to take over small towns. If he's going to be doing it in bigger places, he's going to need bigger bloody spheres. I think that would make sense if he's trying to take over the whole planet. Reggie deciding that he'd like to go out fighting, even if it isn't the reality. Telling Mike that he'd rather go out fighting, even if it's not real. I think that's very Reggie. And he has that great scene with him and Angus Scrimm in the void, in the whiteness, where they do have, and it could be perceived as quite talky and quite boring, but I think it's got great dialogue where they're having a real talk about what the film series is really about. Where, why are you doing this? Basically, is the tall man's question, and Reggie tells him friendship, loyalty, and that's really what the whole franchise is about for me. Is the relationships between Mike, between Jody, between Reggie, that they will go to the ends of the earth and beyond, into different dimensions for each other, literally, for each other's friendship, without question. They never need to think twice about it, and it kind of puts on paper there, which I really like, putting that out there in number 5. It goes kind of, as Jimmy mentioned, it probably thinks it's a bit Lynchian, doing the dual realities, where, like Twin Peaks: The Return, where Cooper goes into a different reality with Laura Palmer, and everybody's got a different name all of a sudden. But it's really more like one of those brilliant Star Trek: The Next Generation episodes where they would jump between different universes, like Remember Me, or the one where Worf wins the Bat'leth contest. It's more like that kind of feel, kind of fun, just jumping between strange realities. Normally, I'd hate the CGI but I'm so familiar with the characters by this point that I forgive it. And I like the world, although yes, it's very computer generated, but when we get to see what the tall man's done to the world, and it looks all red, and it's almost like it's turned into the planet that we see at the start of the first film. Obviously a much more computer generated version, but it's as if this is what he does. He uses up these planets and moves on to the next one somehow. But again, without explaining too much of it, you're just left to kind of extrapolate that. So again, it's not giving you too much, just enough to get on with. I like the showdown towards the end between the two camps over the precipice in hell. Essentially, I mean, the tall man pretty much calls it hell. It reminded me of like 80s B movies, like Empire of the Dark, that kind of thing. It's got a cool vibe to it. Rocky showing up in the mid credits was kind of bizarre. Nobody's favorite character. What was she doing back? But it's kind of fun. It's almost like setting up a spin-off that nobody's ever asked for and ever will happen anyway. But
for
it's
sure,
like, yes, like the Avengers do it. Why can't we? And nobody's ever going to ask for a Rocky spin-off with that short actor, are they? So
Rocky and Chunkwinkle.
yeah. I just think it's a really nice capper that's got a lot to say about aging and about friendship and about the franchise in general. And I think it understands what it is. And the low budget is completely forgivable, because the ideas are there. And I'll take that any day over a film that's got a lot of money, but with no soul, no heart, and no ideas. So yeah, Phantasm V, Ravager, number 2.
Jamie.
I'm going with number 1. It's got like clunky dialogue, clunky acting, but that's the charm of these late 70s, early 80s horror movies. You watch them, and even when they're not great, and I'm not saying this is not great or anything, but even when that era isn't great, you still kind of get the warm and fuzzies, especially when you're watching them in October. It reminds you of when you rented them on VHS and stuff. But the first time the ball kills someone in the head, the guy, not only was I impressed by how it looked, but if you watch it again, look at the reflection in the ball, the mirror reflection. You see in the reflection the drill going into the guy's head. Now that's impressive, especially for 1979, the reflection in the ball of the drill. It's right away, it doesn't make sense. You cut off the fingers, they turn into bugs. Why? Because it's a cool idea? All right, I guess so. I always thought, of all those slasher type movies, I always wondered if it would just benefit from not being as weird and just more straightforward. But then I thought, as I was watching it again, all right, you know what? This is the weird franchise. They need one, right? This franchise's claim to fame. We're the weird one. All right, cool. Someone had to do it. But when I do watch it, like I said, it reminds me of just running those kind of movies, and that's the charm of this movie. I imagined all the slumber parties that were happening in the 81 to 83 when kids were watching this movie downstairs in the basement with the glow of that big TV. And I was thinking of all the conversations the kids were having back then, like, dude, it's orange blood, or dude, I don't know who that chick is with the knife, but she's fucking hot, man. And did that what the hell? The whole building disappeared. And it was almost like voices of the past around me, of these slumber parties from 40 years ago. And it was kind of cool. I felt like I was at like a slumber party again watching the movie. So that's the charm of this movie. And it's my number 2.
My number 2 is Phantasm II. I enjoy this one. Like a couple of you mentioned, it's kind of like the action movie of the franchise, and weird how it starts because it's supposed to take place right after, but it's kind of like, well, is that really how the first movie ended? And then, it goes ahead like 7 years, and, Reggie's like, well, none of that really happened. We kind of all imagine it. It is kind of weird to have a new actor in the role of Mike. I think he works because it's more of an action film. I think he's that action guy, whereas the actor who plays the original Mike is not an action guy kind of actor at all. But they don't look anything alike. They don't act anything alike. So that's kind of weird. But for me, the final sequence in the crematorium, which is the last, like, what, 30, 40 minutes, could be the best sequence in the entire franchise. I mean, that is great. The big battle there when they put that acid in the tall man and his face starts melting. I mean, it's just absolutely brilliant. His whole death scene is great. And then, of course, he's not dead. But I think this is a pretty damn enjoyable film and one of the better, like, sequels to a pretty good debut that's out there. So it's not perfect, but it's lots of fun. It's, for me, I think the most fun film in the entire franchise. So yeah, that's my number 2. Back to Craig.
My favorite was the original, and I really, upon rewatching this, because this was only the second time that I had ever seen this movie. First time was at the Horathon some years back, as I had said before, but I thought it was a good bit of fun. I mean, the opening scene with the oh baby, and then she's dead. I mean, it was just right off the bat, you're starting off on the good foot, and the music in this really helped. I really enjoyed that sparse keyboard, just simple music that was in that, kind of like how Halloween was. And there's a lot of scenes in the movie where it's almost dreamlike in parts, and the way it was filmed is even kind of hazy, like you're just waking up from like, is this real? Is this a dream? Which I thought was kind of cool. As Chris had said earlier, Mike is not a great actor, but he did okay as a kid and everything. I mean, one of the funniest parts is where he interrupts Jody with the one girl, and Jody's got panties in his mouth or something. I mean, I laughed like hell at that. I mean, I thought that was great, because
That's my little brother. I think he's got a problem.
yeah, he kept following him around everywhere. But there's a lot of fun parts in this. Like, the over the top killing of the caretaker, which was like the first ball death, was really pretty cool. And then you have flies and killer dwarfs and just a lot of fun going on. And then at the end, I was confused. It's like, well, what happened to Jody? It doesn't really make sense. It's like, wait, what? He died, and the first of many, boy. I mean, that was cool to see, and getting him sucked through the mirror, kind of like what ends up happening at the end of the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie. So maybe they kind of lifted that from Phantasm, but enjoyable enough, but as a movie. But I agree with what you guys, some of you had said. I kind of think this franchise should have ended at kind of part 2. Just my opinion. With how they went, that it just, as they went on, they just kind of lost my interest and kind of slogged a little bit. But my favorite being part 1, and part 2 is a lot of fun as well.
Cool. Chris?
My number 1 is Phantasm II. For all the reasons that you guys said, the bigger budget, the bigger scope and look of the film. I like how it turns from, the first one was a weird, creepy horror movie, to the second one is sort of like a revenge movie. It's Reggie and Mike now. Fuck the tall man. We're going after him. Let's get weapons. Let's fuck him up. I like the Liz character, and all you guys said. Yeah, the last 30 minutes is a ride, and to me, that's what I like. I mean, to me, this is Aliens to Alien. This is the bigger sequel with more action and guns and firepower, and this came out a couple years after Aliens, so I'm not surprised. But one thing I did that I forgot to mention, that I found out when rewatching all these movies, that the cut scenes that are in part 4 are from a 3-hour original cut that Don Coscarelli had for Phantasm, which of course didn't get released. But now that they remastered Phantasm 1 for the most recent box sets, which looks amazing.
Yeah.
Because I have all the old VHS and Laserdisc and DVD sets, and man, they look awful compared to this new version, the newest version, I should say. But I read that Coscarelli was not ruling out releasing his 3-hour cut of Phantasm, which, you know, I would love to see. Maybe it'd be maybe it would be boring as all hell, or maybe it would explain things a little more. But I'd be very curious to watch it. But yeah, my number one is Phantasm II.
Cool. Dan?
Well, my number one is number one. I saw it in the movies in 1979. It was a rather unique, new, exciting entry into horror films. You didn't really know what was going on, where these things were. It introduced us to the Jawas from Hell, the world's largest theremin gateway. It has, like Craig said, it has when all during this thing, is it a dream? Is it reality? That whole filming with the Vaseline on the lens or the gauze, or it has that dreamy ethereal quality to it, makes you say, is this real or is it not? The other thing that it really brought to the table, without going into too much detail about the film, it did introduce, think about it, it's got a strong, small, rabid fan base, enough that had interest to make more films. But what it brought to the table is it brought in reality the most threatening evil entity or villain that is not physically threatening. He's just he's there. It's the Toll Man. All you have to do is film him walking in slow motion with the clacking of his feet, or going like boy, or something like this. He's ominous, and it's a character that stands right up there in the pantheon with many other big franchise villains, if not so even more intimidating. And the other thing, I think, with Reggie Bannister's situation, why? I think his character became endearing to fans, and if you watch him, like I said, he has no personality, but he's the everyday guy. In fact, he's a below average everyday guy.
He's the underdog, right?
He's an underdog. I mean, everybody else in action movies or horror films is either an ex-Navy SEAL or an ex-assassin, or they've got something, like this. Reggie's just a guy that plays guitar with his friend. He's a good humor man, and it's like the everyday guy. And so anybody that's watching this film, whether you could have been a clerk in a video store, and you say, I could be an action hero. I don't necessarily have to be an ex-New York City cop. So that's why I think brought the endearment and quality. And he was so, really, he was just kind of I liked his character. I think he's kind of fun. But the film itself set the bar for what was going to go on. And I agree, after number 2, they should have said, that's it, and let it lie. But once again, it stands on its own, and guess what? It planted the foundation to last 30 years or more, 79 to 2016. Yeah. So that's enough being said there. That's how I put it. But number 1 for what it is.
Number one. All right, Davey.
Yeah, number 1 for me as well is the first one from 1979. To me, it's an American giallo in a lot of ways. It's got a very giallo-like score. It's got the tone. It's got a voiceover usage that very giallo. The split narrative, the ending that takes you to somewhere that uses complete dream logic to say, did this happen? Did this not happen? Did it matter either way? If Argento or Fulci had a scene where fingers were cut off and turned into bugs, nobody would bat an eyelid. It would make complete sense. So to me, it's very giallo-like in a lot of ways. It starts like any other slasher, doesn't it? With a couple having sex in the graveyards, but it certainly is like no other franchise. It's not Friday the 13th. It's not Halloween. So that's almost a misnomer to start it that way. It's like subverting expectations. It does make you wonder, though, that if the Tall Man is posing as the lady in lavender and having sex with these guys, is the Tall Man getting fucked by all these young guys? That's a really weird image, isn't it?
Can't get that out of your head.
If it's Arcturian, it don't matter.
Yeah. Talk about dream logic. And yeah, Reggie, short, pudgy, who'd think he'd become the star of a long-running franchise? But he is the everyman. He is There's nothing character in the first one, and there's no way in a million years that they expected to make more films with that character. But again, Coscarelli's just a master of being able to extrapolate a few things from one film and say, there's something there, we can take that and blow it up a little bit more. And then obviously he's done that numerous times in the franchise. In the first 10 minutes alone in the film, we get the great sets like the funeral home, that wonderful mausoleum with, even the box set is designed to look like, with the great patterns on it. And they couldn't afford many sets or anything, so they lit it grandly. It looks... So everything else is quite dark to that point, and then when you see that, it's bright and it's really pops out the screen, and that gives it a kind of ethereal quality. It almost looks alien, even though that part's just the mausoleum. It's not actually anything to do with the secret room, the parallel gateway, if you like. I like the kind of cool reveal that we obviously now take for granted, that the funeral director is the tall man, with Mike seeing it through Mike's eyes. I mean, you can imagine the first time you see the tall man just lifting that coffin. Obviously, we can't see that now because we know the tall man is the tall man. But I'd imagine in 1979, seeing that for the first time must have been quite, what's going on here? It must have been quite an interesting reveal, which unfortunately we can never have again. It's one of the problems with franchises where they go on and on. We can never really go back and unknow what we already know. There's a massive lift in here, though. It's where Mike goes to the psychic and puts his hand in the box, and it's just June. It is the Bene Gesserit scene from June. It's I must not fear is the mind killer. It is just exactly word from June. It's bizarre how much that scene left from June. But I love the dream sequence of the tall man over Mike's bed, and then the classic scene, the slow motion scene of him walking down the street with the heels clicking that comes back in the future. So does the sepia photograph. I mean, that's just a little throwaway thing to say, whoa, he's been around for a long time, but who knew we'd in 3 movies' time would actually be visiting that. The ball itself, when that debuts halfway through the movie, is absolutely iconic. What a wonderful little prop it is. It's so unique. It's horrible. What it does is impressive. The effect looks great for a low budget film. I like the reveal of the room itself once you get into it, with the barrels, and then the really low budget Tatooine looking place that the Jawas are on, which again, you just don't explain too much of it. They get compressed because gravity's like that on that planet. That's all we really know about it. We don't really know anything else. What he does there, what's the purpose of what they do? Nothing. We never find out. It doesn't matter. It's something nefarious. That's all you need to know. And then, as Craig mentioned, Elm Street completely rips off the ending, where we find out that the villain has actually not been conquered. Some characters that we think are dead, Reggie is actually alive, just like Nancy's mother. And then getting pulled back through. It's just the ending of Elm Street, isn't it? So Elm Street ripped that off, but hey, they ripped June off. So what goes around comes around. But it's a film about dreams and grief and brotherhood and young people dealing with trauma. And it's very telling that there's no adults in the film, really. I mean, obviously there are, in terms of, Reggie's really an adult, but in the narrative, he's supposed to be a young man just like Jodie. So they're supposed to be still relatively young people. And there's not really any adults in it. There's an old woman, there's an ancient guy, and there's young boy, and then there's, 20-somethings, but they're probably about 35 at the time, but hey, that's movies for you. And there's not really any adults. So it's a very dreamlike quality to that as well. And it just feels like one big treatise on Mike's grief and how he's dealing with the trauma that we think is about his parents at the start, and then ultimately it seems to be about Jodie. And that's where the franchise takes it, going on from there. And to be honest, as much as I love the franchise, I love the 5-film franchise. I'm kind of the opposite to a few of you. I think it's brilliant. It's one of my faves. if it was just a one and done, never mind a two and done, I think this would be an absolutely sensational one and done film. Just a brilliant little American giallo type film that's odd and dreamlike and fantastical and full of imagination and yeah, Phantasm, brilliant stuff.
Kind of like, in a way, like Suspiria has always been kind of labeled as sort of like a supernatural giallo, right? It's kind of similar to this. It's traditionally it's not, but you can see why people would say things like that, right?
Yeah,
the lady in lavender becomes kind of a giallo murderess. She really is. I mean,
yeah, and you wouldn't be surprised to see something like the little toy doll thing from Deep Red, Profondo Rosso, popping up in something like this. So, you know, it's very similar universes, if not same movie. So yeah, Phantasm.
Cool. Jamie, you're number one.
All right, I'm going to defend it. I don't give a shit. I'll own it. Phantasm III is my favorite.
Wow.
Wow.
out of left field he comes.
I swear to God,
I wasn't keeping track, so I was like,
it would be so
holy shit.
hated.
He loves his
I didn't
balls.
see this coming.
Loves his
In fact,
balls.
when I was watching it, I was like, I should get a Phantasm shirt for the show. And I Googled Phantasm III t-shirts. I would have came
To
on
find
here
a
and
lot
you
of
guys
those,
would've been,
Jamie,
"What?"
something tells me there's not many of
Not
them.
very popular.
No, I couldn't find one. I could find two.
There's a fair
on
amount on
Amazon, I cannot
half.com
find
or
a
something
three.
like that.
Look, when Tim came on, little tiny Tim, I was saying to myself, I should be
I
annoyed
love this
by
kid. He's
little
great.
fucker. I should be annoyed, but I'm not. I liked the 4 or 5 minutes of the Home Alone thing. I thought it was fun. All right. I told you how much fun did I have watching these movies? Not the quality of the film or anything. I had the most fun with this one. I liked the Tim, Rocky, and Reggie team. I was a little pissed that in the beginning, Rocky's with her cute friend and they kill the cute one.
Yeah.
And Rocky's left. But hey, you know what? I'd hit Rocky too. I don't give a shit. She had a nice rack. It had a sense of humor. And you know, like when we were doing the Chucky thing, I hated the sense of humor of Bride of Chucky, but Davey liked it. So it's all about, you know, what you think is funny. It may not work for other people. I think Reggie comes into his own on this movie. The moment he was trying to bang Rocky and telling Tiny Tim, shut up, because he wants to go in alone with her, I thought it was great. That's when I started liking Reggie. But this is the thing, you got to remember, I'm a big Army of Darkness fan. So when you start borrowing from that and you start turning Reggie a little bit into an Ash character, you got me hook, line, and sinker. You know, I'm all in with that stupid shit. And I saw like alien influences as well. The thing is, I just laughed more than once. And if I'm laughing, I'm having a good time. And I can't say that about my bottom two. So I think Phantasm III, Lord of the Dead is my jam.
Right.
There's a reason why he's on the Contrarians.
That's why the world is a wonderful place to live.
I did not see this coming that everyone was going to hate it. I was like, wow, really? All
I
right.
guess we just didn't look at it as a comedy franchise, Jamie, and how many laughs we were going to get.
I think the less serious this franchise gets, the more fun I have with it. And this is the least serious one.
Yeah, I was going to say, 3 is definitely the least serious.
Yes.
But Bruce Campbell can pull off comedy in tongue in cheek, like that. Three
See,
strikes.
that
But
would
like
be
I
mine.
said,
Like an
Reggie's
Army of
trying to be
Darkness. He goes, "Ooh, that must have hurt."
Him
That-
failing of being like a Bruce Campbell kind
Mhm.
of becomes his charm in itself.
Yeah, that would be my difference, though. If trying to make an Army of Darkness and failing, that annoys me more than just not trying in the first place. To be honest, I just feel like I'd rather be watching Army of Darkness then.
But see, Phantasm III, like it or not, it got kind of pushed to the side. You know, they put a lot of money into it, and they said they pushed it to that direct-to-video market more so than a couple of screenings. So
It was a huge hit, though. It was a huge
that?
hit on video, massive
a
hit
huge
on
hit on video. That's where they were going to make their money. They weren't going to fill the theaters with it because they couldn't fill the theaters with number 2. That bombed. I mean, I can't understand how that bombed after 8 years. The ball was back. How is that possible that it bombed? And but it's the way it goes. You can't predict it.
how many films were out in 1988 that are absolutely. I mean, Chucky was 1988, wasn't it, the first Child's Play? So crowded marketplace, I guess.
Also, too, 8 years is a long time. 8-9 years is a long time between films. When when the first film did pretty well.
Phantasm, the first film, did box office bonkers. When it came low budget, made a lot of money, but once again, it was a word of mouth thing, and that was right before, and that was released before the home video market really was taking off.
Yeah.
It wasn't until the early '80s when it came out on Embassy, I believe, video. So then it got really a lot of leverage. Same as Night of the Living Dead, got leverage in the home video market, or got mileage in the home video.
Jamie made the point right at the start, though, that correctly, this is the era where all the studios are just looking for anything in their vaults to try and get a cheap slasher or a horror film out there. Resurrect Norman Bates and make a Psycho sequel and that kind of thing. It's this era, isn't it? So
For sure.
It's so funny. Universal already had Halloween. They were MCA, and of course, Psycho, things like that. So really, for them to latch on to Phantasm, that's kind of out of left field in some respects. But it was that unique and that weird to see it the first time out in the theaters. There was so much going on. Like I said, there's the planet. There's the place where the stones are. Here are the midgets in their coffee containers and rolling around in the. Was it a planet? Was it hell? You never really know. And it kept you guessing the whole time as you're watching. And then at the end, what the fuck? Grabs him through the mirror. It's like, holy shit. And this predates, of course, everybody was saying, it predates Nightmare on Elm Street. So it was kind of pretty unique to watch. You walked out of the theater going like, wow, that was quite the ride.
It looks better too. When Ronnie Blakely turns into a blow-up doll to get pulled through the bloody window in Elm Street, that just looks terrible. But yeah, Angus Scrimm doing it here looks great.
So this the original film was my number one as well, and I remember specifically seeing trailers and commercials for this when it came out, but I didn't get to go see it in the theater. That was like that year. My dad was like, well, I'll take you to one rated R movie this year. And that I picked Alien. That was the one I saw. So I didn't get to see this till it came. We had just gotten cable, and it was either on Cinemax or HBO because we got both of them.
It was a big cable thing,
yeah. It was probably the year. So it was probably a year later. And I remember watching this late one night at the house and like being really kind of freaked out, but in a good way by it, and thinking like this is not a traditional horror movie, because it really isn't. It's a lot of weird stuff going on there. It's it's somewhat hard to follow. There's little like sci-fi elements to it, and I just loved it. And also too, it's so atmospheric, which I think is the charm of the first film. And I don't think they really captured that atmosphericness in any of the other films quite like they did in the first one. But yeah, I think it's great. I think the acting is pretty good for what it is. You got a bunch of unknowns, and it just really works. The character Mike works great as a kid. I think he's really good in the first movie. I don't like him in any of the other ones. I think though they missed the ball on the Jody character, because I think he's charismatic, good-looking guy, sings, the whole scene where they're playing guitar together and singing. I mean, I thought that was kind of cool. And I'm just like, remember the end of the film, like, you're going to kill this guy off? It's like, that's a guy you can kind of build on going forward, but they decided not to go that route. But yeah, really good. The balls are great. And, the tall man is a kind of, like Dan mentioned, he's one of those like horror icons that's really not all that threatening. And really all he does is talk. But when he talks, and the way he walks, there's something to be said for that.
He shows up, this shit ain't good.
Yeah, exactly.
He doesn't have a chainsaw or a hand glove. He has nothing. He just walks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm surprised they didn't try to bring back the Tommy character, from the first movie, the funeral that they were going to, that, to try to do something with him in one of the later movies. Because if things were a dream, or if they didn't happen,
anything's possible. Yeah.
I guess it's because the relationship's a trilogy. It's a trinity, isn't it? It's Bones, Spock, and Kirk, isn't it? It's Reggie, it's Mike, and it's Jodie. Really, you don't need a fourth point to that relationship.
But that's the interesting thing about John Coscarelli is he has a certain way of making film. You look at Bubba Hotep or John Dies at the End. There's really certain quirky things he does in his films. I mean, he's a pretty talented filmmaker. Working whatever he works with, and Phantasm was the one that set the bar for him.
It's any movie that where half the film or more takes place in like a cemetery or a mortuary or whatever. It's works for me.
Yeah, and it manages to do it without the cheap things like loads of smoke machines and whatnot. It still
you don't
does
even need it,
atmosphere
right?
without
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it
Yeah.
still manages to get that dready atmosphere without doing the, was it Friday the 13th Part 4, where they just spent half the budget on smoke machines and dry ice. And it just looked silly. This film doesn't do that. It just kind of lets
No.
you say, no, graveyards are spooky enough on their own, you know?
Right. And most of the film is in the dark, right? It's shot
Yeah.
really, really well when you think about
That's
it.
for budgetary concerns, the
Yeah.
lighting. You know.
Yeah, there
And
is only a couple of
one
daylight
thing
scenes.
about Phantasm do about the film, and it's done either Phantasm I or Phantasm II. It's never been done another horror film before or after. Is that when the guy is killed by the spear, his bladder releases. Have you ever noticed
That's
that?
Yes.
the first one.
Was the first one. It's like you never saw. It's like wow, you hear about this, and you're like wow, that's a pretty weird, quirky thing to put in there.
Because that's what should happen, right?
Yeah, that's what
Every
happens.
instance.
Yes, your bladder releases, and it's kind of wow,
first
that
thing
shows you're dead. And that was kind of like no one ever did it before nor after.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even think.
I mean, everything would be a golden shower film at that point in horror, but that's it's
You'd have a lot of peeing then. A lot of these
a lot
films.
of peeing.
A lot of peeing.
So, all right, we got a $10,000 budget for urine. All right, let's make sure we got it right.
or honey mustard, as Craig.
Or honey mustard.
Exactly. So there you have it, everybody. Ranking the films of the Phantasm franchise. So if you are familiar with these, rank them as you like them or don't like them down in the comments below. And let us know what you think of these films. And stay tuned. I'll give you a little preview of what's happening in 2 weeks here on the Monsters Den. So for those of you who might know, Craig and Chris and myself go to this film festival in Pennsylvania called the Exhumed 24-Hour Horror-thon each and every year. Well, we just came back from that. When we go to see these films, it's 24 hours. They showed 15 films this year. You don't know what the films are before you go in. All you get are a list of clues for each film. You got to kind of try and guess what they are and see how well you do, right? Well, what we're going to do 2 weeks from today is Craig and Chris and I are going to give these same clues to Dan, Davey, and Jamie and see if they can figure out the films that we actually saw. So, and you at home watching can try and guess along with them. So that'll be happening 2 weeks from today. Guess the films, guess the Horror-thon films from 2023. And till then, visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube all together all the damn time. Till next time, here at the Monsters Den, for Craig Kaminski, Chris Allo, Dan Brown, Davey Gallagher, and Jamie Laszlo, I'm Pete Pardo. We'll see you soon here on the Monsters Den. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Yep.
Enjoyed the show. Take care.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.